Hey there rebels, Sergio here from Extinction Rebellion, Queensland. So what I'm sharing here today is a video of a webinar that me and my friend Greg did before Brisbane's, I guess, Rebellion Day. This would be analogous to a Wave 2 type action under the Australian Mass Mobilisation Project strategy. And in hindsight, the plan and the proposal that we were sharing in this webinar was really good, but also it didn't go ahead. So in brief, the plan was for a bunch of people. At the time we had 7 minimum people locked in at the time of the recording, to get arrested in a very simple manner, blocking a road, to refuse to sign bail and thus not be allowed to leave police custody, and to plead not guilty to their charges, and attempting to use the extraordinary emergency defense as a mechanism to successfully be found not guilty. So of course this would mean that these people would be kept in prison, transferred to a prison here in Brisbane to be in custody. This is a common thing. 40% of prison population is held in remand. But anyway, point is that it's like a significant sacrificial action where you can apply like a lot of like political pressure on the judicial system. Anyway, I talk a little bit about it in the video, but that was the brief strategy. And I'm not sure if anyone has watched the video that Roger Hallam made called Pivoting to the Endgame. But if you have, basically what we did was we herded toward not doing it. So basically what happened was, some people had some doubts, and that very quickly spread throughout the group of people that were going to do it. And so there was like 2 people left that wanted to do it. Well, actually, yeah, there was me and Greg that wanted to do it. Anyway, that's not important. The point is that we came up with different reasons why we shouldn't do it, and why it might not have been the right time. But in hindsight, I believe that this was the perfect opportunity to do it, to go to prison, that is. And yeah, we really missed out, and I think that, that was a significant reason why, I guess, we haven't won yet in Australia, or at least in Queensland. Or, yeah. Anyway, because of course, shifting the Overton window is an important factor in the way that we do our rebellion. So anyway, that's my rant. This is an archived video that we made. Please have a serious listen and think about how maybe you want to use a tactic like this. I still think it's a really good tactic, and people should consider it strongly in a flashpoint type action, like a Wave 2 type stuff. So for Wave 2, please everyone have a look at this and have a think about it with your local group, and who knows, maybe we'll bump into each other in prison. Love you lots. Bye bye. Cool. Hey everyone.
Whose land are we on?
Whose land are we on? Yeah. We are on
Turrbal and Yagara
land. In Minjin, which is where we'll be having the Rebellion Day mobilisation on Tuesday coming up
this Tuesday. The rebellion starts. We're all feeling pretty powerless about the climate crisis and what's going to happen, and that ends this Tuesday. We take the power back.
Yeah.
As Rage Against the Machine once said.
Taking power back.
Yeah.
So I'm Sergio.
And my name is Greg.
And we're going to be pretty much talking a little bit about tactics of rebellion. And I guess standing up for what you believe in. Right?
Yeah.
So Greg has, do you want to introduce yourself, Greg?
Yeah. So I've been doing activism for a few years, since about 2012. I've been doing nonviolent direct action and studying it and learning as much as I can. I think it's the most powerful force in the world that's really unharnessed. And it comes from our love from one another and our desire to see the world a better place. And I've been doing my best to learn as much as I can about it and how to use that to affect positive change for all of us and to make the world better. So mainly I've been doing anti-war stuff. And because I've got a real strong passion for children who are being killed overseas. So that's my passion, and that's what's driven my activism. Serge.
Yeah. Hey, Todd, do you mind muting yourself there for a sec? Cheers. I'm Sergio. I'm 20. I've mostly been around in climate activist spaces for a little bit since I started studying a few years ago, tried out a bunch of different tactics, but pretty interested in Extinction Rebellion tactics because they seem to be actually working and drawn upon what has worked in the past to actually fully affect system change in crises. So I've been a part of Extinction Rebellion just this year. Moved to Brisbane to get involved here. Done some actions here, and we're really rolling forward, and I'm super excited for the future. That's me.
Yeah, so that's a bit about us, and so we're just going to go into now a few things about resistance. Serge is going to talk a bit about actions and sort of some resistance you can do, and how you can slow down the legal process, like how you can resist the legal process in the watch house. And I'm just going to go through. I recently did an action where I pled not guilty up near Bowen, and I went through the whole court case of pleading not guilty, arguing that there's a climate crisis, so I wasn't legally liable. So I'll go through a bit of that.
Yeah. So the sort of foundation of Extinction Rebellion is that we are looking at mass participation, civil disobedience to actually force system change because this is necessary to actually deal with a threat. This is different from other sort of climate advocacy that has been done in the last sort of 30 years. And these are from tactics that have been used and succeeded with before. So we are rebelling against extinction, and what that means is we are rebelling against anything that is causing this climate crisis. So that is the fossil fuel industry, that is governments that are complicit with it, with this crisis and actually actively helping to facilitate it by doing things like subsidizing the fossil fuel industry and stuff like that. So pretty much the message that I want to give today is that non-compliance is rebellion, and this is really important to actually show the government that you're not willing to you're not willing to participate in a society that is actively heading for extinction, because that is not moral and kind of not a very good idea.
Yeah, and it's the idea that there's only governments. Pretty much what is the definition of a state is that it has monopoly of legitimate violence, so it can try and control us with violence. And thanks to lots of activists who've gone before us and worked really hard, the limits of the violence on its own citizens is actually much smaller now than it used to be. So, for instance, they can't kill us; they have to go through lots of due process. At the moment in this history, that's not going to stay that way forever. They have to go through lots of due process to imprison us for long times. So this is a really good time in history to to step up the resistance. So basically all they can do is put you in jail. And the idea of non-violent civil disobedience, of getting arrested and staying in the watch house and staying in jail as long as possible, is it costs the government money and resources. And thanks to capitalism, the prison system's already stretched. So if we can get as many people in as possible in filling the watch houses, filling the court systems, and eventually, hopefully, filling the jails, then the government will be forced to negotiate and take seriously our demands. It's this idea we need to unlearn this idea that governments lead. Governments don't lead, they follow. And this is one of the strongest ways we have as citizens to take the power to the government to say, you're actually killing us, you're killing our ecosphere, you're killing our children's future. That's not acceptable. But the governments are following the power of the small, organised, rich people at the top. So we as the people at the bottom need to organise, and this is the best tactic we have to fill the prisons, cost the money. And we're going to go through then how best to clog the systems up and what you can expect to do, and hopefully join us.
Yeah. So the reason why non-compliance is rebellion is because states and governments actually rely upon people to actively enforce the state, to comply with its laws, to comply with like things like paying tax, for example. Like, you know, we that's a good idea to harness compliance of its citizens so it can feed it back into supporting the community. So when those things aren't happening, the power you have is actually to stop complying with it, because then it doesn't exist. You know, like, it really is a sort of social fabric that we are existing on. This hasn't been around forever. You know, we're living in a sort of global capitalist society at the moment. In the past, we've lived in monarchies, in other kind of things. I'm not very well read up.
So the idea of the state is it's the modern nation state. It's a particular new thing, but a new part of history. But the idea is that you're in a contract with it, and you can, you know, they want to tell you that you're always in a contract with it. So what we plan on doing is just, you know, the state will keep you safe if you are obedient, but the state is no longer keeping us safe. So that's why we're, you know, it's broken its contract. So now we're able to hold it to account by filling up its jails.
Yeah.
That's what we're planning on doing. So I might just run through my case really as quickly as I can. I tend to tell stories, so if I talk too much, I've got people in the room who might let me know. So that'll be great, and I'll try to keep it concise, but also hit the main points. So in November last year, up on Juru land, near Bowen, I took an action on a railway line that feeds the Adani-owned Abbott Point coal terminal. I climbed up a tripod. I went into it knowing that I wanted to plead not guilty. So what most people do in activist circles, they go through, they go to court, they plead guilty, they take a fine. I actually said I'm not guilty and tried to run a defence, and I went through months of back and forwarding and trying to work out my legal thing. In the end, someone pointed me to the idea that in Queensland there's actually a section in the law called the extraordinary emergency, which is the idea that if you're acting as an ordinary person with ordinary power in response to an extraordinary emergency, you're not criminally liable for what you do. So I got arrested in November. About 2 or 3 weeks later, I went to court I took bail. So as soon as I could, have done in the watch house for 2 or 3 hours. As soon as I could, I took bail and was out of the watch house and on my own. I went back to court a few weeks later and just had to enter a plea. So the magistrate says, how do you plead? And I said, not guilty. And then I had to go back for what they call a confirmation of hearing, which was just a second mention. So I think it was February or March, I had to go back to court, and they said, are you sure you're pleading not guilty? And then they said, yeah, okay, what date suits you for a hearing, Mr. Rolls? Prosecutor, what date suits you? They set a date at the end of May, and I went in, so I had from February to May to prepare my hearing. Now, all this time I was on bail, and I was allowed out of I was never in custody once I was out after my action. And so I went and I had a full day hearing where I had to run my case, sort of like you see, I self-represented. I had some help from lawyers where I argued that there was an extraordinary emergency. So I spent a lot of the time trying to prove that the climate catastrophe is an extraordinary emergency. I had a witness, Professor Brendan Mackey of Griffith University, who was the one of the co-lead authors of the IPCC report. The title of the report escapes me right now, but it was the one that sort of said, we've got 12 years to act, or we're going to face a climate catastrophe. So he phoned in. He gave me a very important witness statement, which in 5 pages outlines why the climate catastrophe is an extraordinary emergency by the dictionary definition. And so I had to prove that, and I had to prove that I acted as an ordinary person under ordinary power. So that took all day, back and forth. I had to get in the witness stand, and the prosecutor grilled me, and which was fine because I was, I'm speaking truth. They were trying to sort of deny climate science. I was able to say, this is how science works. It's a climate catastrophe. So I was in the witness stand, did all that. We actually ran out of time on the day because they started my hearing a bit late. But if you get a full day in court, it will take just one full day. They started mine a bit late because they had some emergency stuff they had to do in the morning. So I had to go back a week later to get my verdict, which was a very profound, very resounding guilty. I believe the magistrate described my belief that the climate crisis is going to get us all as a narcissistic, self-indulgent belief. So that's the Bowen magistrate for you. And so I was found guilty and given a rather large fine, which was meant as a deterrent for other people doing other rail actions. So where my case fell down a bit was proving that I acted as an ordinary person, setting up a tripod, climbing up over a railway line. That's not what your average person does. So hopefully with Extinction Rebellion stuff, what we're doing with sitting on the street and locking arms, we're just sitting on streets. We're just blockading entries to buildings, right? Like these are things that ordinary people can do in ordinary power. So hopefully that'll have a bit more of a stance. That being said, to actually be found not guilty would be an amazing thing. It would set a precedent that then anyone can get arrested doing climate emergency activism and would not be punishable. So it'd be a pretty extraordinary, amazing thing. But the more people who do it, the more impetus it puts on the courts to actually go, there is a climate crisis and the governments have failed to protect us. And also the more court time will clog up, which is, like I said before, the court system only has a limited capacity to deal with what it's doing. Go and sit through a court day any day. They're always rushing. They're always trying to get things through. And the more people we get in there, the more they have to listen to us, the more they have to take us seriously. So that was my case that wrapped up in early June. And I am keen as Colonel's mustard to go again.
Yeah. Awesome. So this is this is something that is being done more and more around the world. So recently, about just over 1,100 people that were arrested in London in their April rebellion. They have begun going through the court system and actually being charged with charges for their arrests, and quite a large portion of them so far have been pleading not guilty and using a conscientious protector defense, which is different. It's got different. It's a different defense because they don't have the extraordinary emergency.
Yeah, in Queensland law and in Victoria, we found out recently this defense is codified, which means it's written into law, extraordinary emergency, and legally it's the best one we've got. Yeah. And it's an easy thing to prove that. A decent magistrate will say, yes, obviously there's an extraordinary emergency. So we'll at least get that part, I reckon, very soon. Even if we don't get found not guilty, I think we'll still be able to prove there's an extraordinary emergency relatively easy very soon. The more people that do it, the faster it will happen. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's like the fact that we're in Queensland is actually like a super powerful thing and super advantageous thing for the cause globally, actually, because and we might not succeed, but I think even in the case where we don't succeed, I think this is actually necessary to resist this idea that actually defending your future by disrupting society is the wrong thing to do. People have been doing this for since human history. This is something that has happened over and over again, and right now we are actually facing a global extraordinary emergency, so it's super critical that we are employing every single tactic that we possibly can to resist this idea that this is the wrong thing to do, because we all know that it's clearly not.
Yeah. So, do you want to talk a bit about So I took bail. Most of the times I've been arrested about 10 times. I've often taken bail. A couple of times I haven't. Serge's got a bit more experience than me recently of not taking bail and of resisting in the watch house. So maybe you should go through that a bit. Yeah. This is about taking up time and resources of the police, and as much money and resources we can take at the state, the better chance we have of success.
Yeah. It's I guess that there's definitely also a moral case for it. So the regular process for being arrested is, you'll be taken into custody, you'll be taken to a place to be processed, the police station. They'll do a bunch of stuff like ask you questions and get your fingerprints and whatnot, and tell you what you're charged with, and then you'll sign a little document, which is your bail undertaking. It pretty much just means come back to court on this date, where you're going to be pleading guilty or not guilty for your charges. So if you don't sign that document, you cannot be released from police custody. The only manner in which you can be released from police custody if they are charging you is if you sign a bail document. So I haven't signed my bail documents 4 times, and so what happens when you don't sign your bail documents is they have to keep you in police custody. What that means is they'll keep you in a cell with some cushions and a blanket, hopefully, until the next morning, and you'll see the magistrate the next morning, which is pretty cool because it means like you get your whole process done from your action to not being on bail or anything like that in sort of like a maximum of 2 days, hopefully. Whereas for Greg, it took 8 months?
Weeks and months.
Yeah.
So you can get it. It's just if the idea is just to punch it out a bit quicker for yourself, but also it's just a way to fill up the system.
That's right. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why you might want to do that. And for me, it was definitely that I'm not going to be slowing down anytime soon. This is an emergency. We should be doing civil disobedience every single day until we can create a resilient society that can deal with this. And that's why I was doing my thing, as well as the moral case of not complying. So that also that extended a bit more for me. So, for example, I try to use my rights in every manner that I possibly can, including remaining silent the whole time through the watch house, even when they ask me for my name and that kind of stuff, or they try to make me sign documents like the property they brought in with me, or medical questions and that kind of stuff. I also don't eat or drink while in the watch house so far, but because they have a duty of care over you. So those are some ways that you can not comply while in police custody. Do you want to talk about the way that we can combine these two ideas?
Yeah, so what some of us are thinking of doing, what the plan is to sort of combine our two things. So where we would refuse bail and also plead not guilty. So there's going to be a few of us, and the more that do it, the more cost and pressure it puts on the state system. So the idea is that you refuse bail, you can refuse to comply, and the more we refuse to comply with the police in the watch house as much as you want to, you feel comfortable with, you can. And so what you would do is you would stay in the watch house, basically refusing to sign bail. So for them to give you bail, they put a sheet in front of you with certain conditions and you have to sign it. So if you refuse to do that, no matter how much they put pressure on you, then they have to put you in front of a magistrate as soon as possible. When you go in front of a magistrate, you're asked to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. So what we're thinking, what I'm going to do, what we're planning on doing is saying not guilty and refusing to sign bail. And this has the effect of keeping people in the machine and the system and clogging it up, costing them money and resources, and forcing the government to maybe listen to us a bit more seriously, and staying in as long as possible. There's a few things that might work on our side. We're expecting that the bail conditions are going to be pretty horrendous. What bail conditions are supposed to do is to make sure that you don't reoffend and that you don't, and that you definitely return to court. But they've been using things since at least 2015. I've received conditions like can't talk to certain people, can't go to various addresses where they know you're staying, in order to try and get you to just try and annoy your life and slow you down. So one of the things that we can say is like, these bail conditions are horrendous, we're not going to sign on these things, and say that to the magistrate. We're not signing because the bail conditions are horrendous. So some people might want to leave them, but I will probably stay anyway. But it's also, but one of the things that happens if those bail conditions are horrendous, happened to a friend of mine at Talisman Sabre, was when it came to sentencing, he said, I should get time served because I spent so long in custody. And the magistrate said, but, you refused bail, so that's your own problem. And he said, I only refused bail because the bail conditions were so horrendous. So therefore it's on the police and it's on the magistrates who didn't change my bail conditions, so therefore I should get time served. And the magistrate in this case, they're not always going to, but in this case the magistrate agreed and said, yeah, you're right, I'm going to give you no fine because you've already served time. So there's a couple of things where we can, one, clog up their system and cost them money, two, fight these horrendous bail conditions that they're putting on people like us trying to protect our home, and three, count it towards time served. So as activists and as a community, we don't actually have to come up or worry about paying fines or anything like that. We can make the government pay that for us. So there's three really good reasons, other than spending lots of time in custody, which comes with its own cost. But I think the cost of the climate breakdown is also pretty high, and this is one way to counter that. It's a pretty low cost when you think of that, really, like the suffering we might help avert. The three really good reasons to stay in the watch house: refuse bail, plead not guilty, and stay in for possibly a matter. No one's really done this before, but we suspect you would probably do a few weeks. They'd speed up like everything to get you to your hearing. So it could be a few months, but I suspect it would be a few weeks until your hearing date. We also have people on the outside who are willing to help us because you have to prepare for your case. So we've got our witness statement, Professor Brendan Mackey. His partner is actually happy to coordinate getting that statement to everyone while you're in the watch house, or I can send it to you now. And then you can have that ready to go. If you stay in the watch house for a few weeks, get to your hearing, you can present that and say, it's an extraordinary emergency under Section 25 of the Criminal Code. Here's that defence, and then you have to argue that what you did was an ordinary person under ordinary power. Hopefully lawyers might step forward and represent us, but we don't know that, and we don't know what they'll do. So we probably all will self-represent. But that's the plan. It'll clog up the system and then let the system do what it needs to do to us. But the more of us that do this, the more we can break the system down and affect some real positive change to protect our home.
That's right. And also, the more people that are actually going through this process simultaneously, the more actually like social pressure it'll be putting on the judicial system.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone sort of thinks about, law and order and the judicial system and this kind of stuff as these sort of fixed things that, have been perfectly designed and are sort of made of stone, but actually it's a social fabric,
mm-hmm.
and they are they're changed when they need to be from time to time, and we can put huge pressure on it from if we do this, because we are fighting for our right to live, and we are doing so peacefully, non-violently, and with ordinary powers.
Yeah. Can I just say, historically, it was the filling up of the jails is what really fueled the suffragette movement, which was the rights of women to get votes, particularly in England. So it was the filling up of jails. In the anti-segregation movement, the Martin Luther King led movement of the 1960s, it was they spent lots of time in jail and refused bail and stayed in as long as they could, because it forced local governments to listen to them. And Gandhi and his movement as well spent lots of time. In fact, Gandhi said the revolution will not be won in the parliament or in the universities. It will be won in the streets and in the jails. So that's very deliberate strategy that Gandhi saw and went to fill up the watches in the jails at the time. And then that got essentially that got the British out of India. So pretty big thing to do. They've been trying for a while. It was filling up the jails that did it. Not armed violence, not petitions, not marches. It was filling up the jail cells that cost the British so much money. They're just like, we're just going to get out. Screw this.
Yeah. So might talk a little bit about some of that stuff. Yeah. For 30 years, we've known that the climate change could become an existential threat to humanity and society. And for 30 years, We've been sort of marching in the streets, signing petitions, lobbying, voting, doing really important work. But unfortunately, the government hasn't been listening to us doing all of that stuff that is supposed to actually represent us in the democracy that we're supposedly in. And so the reason why Extinction Rebellion is changing tack, which I'm hopefully you're all aware of, is because these things aren't working. And so we're looking at full mobilization of our rights and of our power, of people that are peaceful, that are acting out of love, and that are willing to sacrifice whatever it takes to actually sustain a future for themselves and their loved ones. And it's really important that this is communicated to the people in power, and to the citizens, because people will stand by you if you are willing to actually face the consequences of your actions. And personally, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And so, we really need to think about, what this climate crisis means for us. And I think that happens through quite a lot of grieving about sort of what's happening already, and the sort of future that is forecasted by the scientists. And so, it's almost like a no-brainer for me, because it feels like in the last 100 years, societies and the way that we have lived this system, the way that we have lived in this system of capitalism and growth has actually stolen my future already. And so I'm just, it's not like I have much to lose in that sense, because it's already sort of gone.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm prepared to do whatever it takes.
Yeah. Similarly, I'm a little bit older, but still it'll affect my future, my old age. And I, give a stuff about me. Like, there's so many other beings that are suffering right now. Children, and all sorts of people will suffer. And it's my duty to try and, slow that down. So, yeah, we've got dinner arriving. So, thanks so much, Izzy. So I don't know if there's anything, I have much more else to say. Do you want to open it up to questions?
Yeah.
Unless, you want something else to say? Or?
No, we can open up to questions.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you all.
Yeah, so if people want to chuck their camera on, put their hand up, they can unmute the mic and ask a question. Jan, you've got a question?
Sorry, we just can't hear you.
I better turn you up.
Feel free to type if it's easier. Sorry? No, you're right, go.
You're good.
I've never seen anyone have to pay money.
Yeah.
That usually only happens to people of large means who might leave the country. I've not seen it. They might do it one day to be punitive against us, but I've not seen it ever happen to any activists that I know of.
Yeah, my understanding is it's more of a Hollywood thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So keep your wallet at home, you'll be okay.
All they require is a signature for you not to reoffend before your court date, and for you to show up for your court date. And bail conditions is just conditions that are placed on you between you signing bail and that court date. So, for example, for my last charge, my bail condition was I couldn't enter or remain within 5 kilometres of Queen Street Mall in Brisbane until my court date.
Yeah.
Cool.
Any other questions? All right, we just got another. We actually got a couple of people in the room with us, but one of them's back from getting down. So Dool's got a question. I might just say it again for the camera too. Yeah.
Talking about putting pressure on the state and making it cost the government money, but I don't know heaps about the prison industrial complex, but what's stopping them from just being like, all right, we'll privatise all the prisons and make money out of all these protesters that are now in there?
Yeah. So Hannah just asked the question about privatisation in jails. It still costs the state money to do this in the watch house and go through the court system. And the evidence that I've read, which I'm not an expert on this, is actual privatisation actually costs governments more money in the long run. So you're just paying it to a contractor. So yeah, like I'm not up on that, but it still does cost the government money. Like they're paying the contractor. It's the only difference. So yeah, we'll make Serco some money, but it still costs the government money. And they'll have to think about what we're doing. Yeah.
And it's also super important to show people what you're willing to do for your future. And because, like, I don't know, like, you know, walking out onto a road and sitting on it, like, that's really simple. And I'm willing to do that. But I'm also willing to do, like, way more. But also, like, the way that you change society is literally with 3.5% of the population going out and sitting on the road.
Yeah. So when we use that 3.5% number, which is research, like every non-violent revolution that gets to 3.5% of the population always succeeds, and it can be as low as 1%. But that's not 3.5% coming to regular protests or doing legal stuff. That's 3.5% of people who have full-time gone out into the streets and taken over cities. So you need people to actually be willing to go to the other side of the state's law and to actually like take that power back because they're killing us. So you actually need that 3.5% is people actually regularly doing civil disobedience that's on the other side of the law. That's the only way. I hate to say it because I don't like getting arrested. I hate doing it. Like I hear people say, I'm not in a position to get arrested, I'm arrested. Me too. I hate it so much. It's such a pain in the ass. But it's the only way we're going to like avert the worst of the climate crisis. Yeah. It's the only way we're going to protect. Right now, there's kids in Chennai who are dying from lack of drinking water because there's not enough ice melt coming off the Himalayas. For that, to protect them, protect species in the Amazon, I would spend the rest of my life in jail. I don't want to. There's a million other things I want to do, but I would for those kids. So, that's what we need to do. Unfortunately, it's all we've got left to do.
Yeah, and it's kind of like I don't know. Do you feel like it's taking your power back? Like, yeah, you're in prison, but it's like you're not like sitting around like I don't know, holding a banner outside a stone building, being like, please. You're like, no, I'm going to like resist you until like you do. It's
for me. It's always been probably always been a very liberating experience. Consciously, non-violently, peacefully breaking the law. I remember the first time I did it, it was like, oh no, like I'm so scared. How do I push through this barrier? And then once I did it, it was like I've never felt freer or happier since. Like it's such an amazing feeling to be like the people are trying to stand over you and tell you that you have to be a certain way. And when you stand on your own morality and your own values, and you say, actually, I'm going to be human and do what I know is right. It's when you really get to know yourself and really learn who you are and get to be like the most free I reckon you can be in society.
I definitely agree. But yeah, like if you're terrified of being arrested, that is totally appropriate. So we've got a question from iPhone.
Hi phone.
Hi phone. Says, would refusing to pay the fine be part of this tactic? I think. Any
Yes. Yeah. So as you heard before, I'm fiddling a bit, like trying to appeal possibly to knock my fine down, but I'm of a mind to just cancel the appeal and say I'm not going to pay it, which would probably end up with me getting 3 months in prison in the long run. But I'd be willing to. Just on Leanne, your statement there about I'd have to chain myself to a drill. Yeah, that's good.
That's sort of why I can't get arrested in the city, and also I'll have my kids, so I sort of got to look after this sort of thing. So.
Yeah, and that's the next thing is when.
They've held up on fracking for a bit, but I've heard they're going to do another couple of wells up the road soon, so
yeah.
And there's not many people out here. You know, we're miles away. We're 5 hours out, west. So, thinking about somehow. Sure.
Yeah, definitely, and anything you can do is good, but we need to that. I guess that, the next thing, which I wasn't going to talk about this, but, one of the sort of people in my life I look to for at least his political experience, he said that, the Iraq War, the largest marches in history didn't stop one of the greatest humanitarian disasters. If 10% of the people who are willing to march were willing to go to jail, didn't go to jail but said, I will support your kids, I will help you pay your bills, you know, just 10%. And then 1% said, all right, we're willing to do the actions, we'll climb the fences, we'll hit that, had have been willing to do that to blockade it. I was in the army at the time, so I was away, I can't talk. But been willing to do that, Australia would not have gone to war. The same in the US. If 1% of the population there who are anti-war had been willing to get in the way of the war machine, the system would have been so clogged up with people, the government wouldn't have been able to go to war. And that's what we have to think about in the climate. You know, we sort of tried these other strategies and tactics with the Iraq war and it didn't work. 1 million people died in Iraq. So many more people now are at risk, and we have to up the stakes and we have to be willing to pay the price.